generation of America's leaders.
To introduce our honoree this evening, please welcome the President of the Servite Board of Directors and a classmate of Craig's from the class of 1972, Rob Hertz.
Thank you, Tim. Before I begin my introductory remarks, I want to take a moment to recognize and congratulate Tim Brundage, our Master of Ceremonies, for his recent induction to the Servite Hall of Fame. As many of you know, Tim has been the voice of Servite for so many years, announcing football, basketball, baseball, and a variety of other sports, as well as emceeing Servite events such as this leadership dinner tonight. Tim is not only a loyal and dedicated Servite alum class of 73, but also a close and personal friend. He comes from a sports announcing tradition started by his father, a well-known sports broadcaster and personality in Orange County. He tirelessly and graciously provides volunteer services to give a unique charisma and class for the Servite community. So well deserves our small token of appreciation by being one of our inductees into the 2014 Servite Hall of Fame. Congratulations. In the fall of 1968, I, along with 100 other 14-year-old boys, entered Servite High School. That was the first time I was introduced to our distinguished honoree, Craig Keller. Craig and I resided in Fullerton. However, he attended a public elementary school, and I went to St. Philip's. Right off the bat, we had something in common, though, trying to figure out what the Servite thing was all about. From the start, Craig was not bashful about jumping in, getting involved and taking a leadership role. While his size and weight limited his playing abilities on the freshman football team, Craig became very involved in the yearbook publications, school newspaper, various activities committees, and most importantly, student body government and school leadership. I took a look at some of the old yearbooks from 1968 to 1972, and each year Craig grew in stature and responsibility from class representative to student council member to junior class president, and ultimately to ASB student body president, an honor so rightfully deserved and obviously preparing him for the future. In fact, if you take a look at our 1972 yearbook, Craig's bio is a who's who of academic, athletic, and activities achievements that I doubt could ever be surpassed. I'm sure Craig will mention his formal years at Servite and the significant impact it had on his life. Servite priests and brothers, administrators, teachers, and coaches, all great men who did so much to influence and mentor us in those wonderful teen years. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention Mr. and Mrs. Kelly, Pete and Connie, Craig's very funny, friendly, and gracious parents, who have since passed, whom I met while carpooling with Craig during our freshman and sophomore years, and who provided the foundation for Craig's strong work ethic and success. Memories of Craig include being the stellar third baseman for 2 years on the varsity baseball team, a cross-country runner, a passion for tennis, a dedicated history buff, a love of the beach, a Volkswagen Bug, and a car clothes rack that only seemed to consist of corduroy pants, topsider shoes, and a Munsingwear polo shirt. I mentioned the shirt because Craig also worked at the now closed Bailey's Sporting Goods store in Fullerton, and Munsingwear shirt was the dress code at Bailey's. After graduating from Servite, Craig went on to UCLA. Susie and I visited him a couple times, but he was a tough guy to get a hold of. I can't even begin to describe his post-bachelor's degrees and certifications he obtained from after Servite. It was something of a running joke that while most of us graduated after 4 years of college, whenever we'd get together for our minor reunions and discuss where our lives and careers had taken us, it was always Craig that was still in school, pursuing another dream, learning another foreign language, or traveling the globe in conjunction with another post-baccalaureate degree. However, in the true spirit demonstration of the Servite Brotherhood, Craig did find time to be a groomsman in our wedding in 1976, as well as Susie's brother's wedding in 1979, our Servite classmate Ralph. Before I leave, let me also welcome and recognize Craig's family. His brother Pete, Servite class of 66, and his family. Craig's wife of 26 years, Kim, and their 2 beautiful children, Evan. side note, Craig, Kim, and his family are in the process of relocating from Washington, D.C. to Southern California as Craig transitions from the public sector to the private sector at ExxonMobil. They are temporarily renting an apartment in Palos Verdes and trying to decide where to permanently call home. Nothing wrong with Orange County, Craig, I know that. You have Craig's professional bio included in tonight's program. It is obvious Craig has accomplished so much and has amazed his classmates with his opportunities to sit with the Pope, rub elbows with presidents, world leaders, and dignitaries, and work for some of the strongest leaders in our world today. Amazing, but not surprising, considering his track record and strong foundation in Servite. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Servite Board of Directors, the Western Province Order of Friars, Servants of Mary, and the Servite Administration, we are pleased and proud to present Craig Kelly, class of 1972, to Servite National. Before Craig gets up and addresses the audience tonight, we do have one more special recognition we want to do. Our class had a 40-year reunion about 18 months ago, and Hugh Devaney has joined me on stage, who's our project manager, our chairman of our committee, and did just an unbelievable job. And about 8 or 9 months ago, when we heard that Servite was going to honor Craig, we thought as a class we got to do something special in his name and recognition. This is actually something that our class of 71 friends that started before us with Rick Julian, Dana Karcher, Gary Bells, and Mike Cushing, who are I think here tonight, where they actually raised some money after their reunion and made a significant donation to Servite. We, the class of 1972, is an inspiration and a motivation by what Craig has done. We're also presenting Servite a check tonight for $40,000. And there are several here tonight to meet with us right afterwards. We're going to take a class photo, and I do want to recognize one special member from that class of 1972, the Ryan family, who are here tonight with us. Frank and Martha Ryan, most of you that don't know, had 9 boys that went through Servite. Now, Frank was not from our class, but his son Tim is here tonight with us, and so Frank, I want to thank you for all your support and 9 wonderful boys that you put through. Thank you. So anyway, the class of 72, after the presentation tonight, we can gather here at the podium. I appreciate it. Craig, is all yours.
Thank you very, very much. Now, I was asked to tell some stories tonight from my diplomatic career, and Rob's very gracious introduction reminds me of one from the time I worked for Colin Powell. We had gone up to New York because he was going to receive an award at the Waldorf Astoria, a very fancy black tie affair, and the bestower of the award was none other than Henry Kissinger. And Henry Kissinger was in turn to be introduced by the famous journalist Bill Moyers. So Bill Moyers comes up to the microphone and says, "Henry Kissinger needs no introduction, but he insists on one." Rob, I didn't insist on one, but that was a very gracious one. Thank you very, very much. I think everyone in the class of 1972 would agree that right from the freshman year, we knew that Rob would become a stand-up family man and citizen. So it is no surprise that Rob and his wife Susie, a Rosary grad, have set the standard for giving back to an institution that has shaped us. Rob, congratulations and thanks again for that introduction. By the way, some of you may know that on Rob's 54th birthday, he played 54 holes of golf. That's pretty impressive. Susie, I want to book a lawn chair for his 72nd birthday. I want to thank Servite for this invitation to speak tonight. It is a great honor to be part of the excellence in leadership tradition. I especially want to acknowledge Steve Beard, Servite's Vice President for Advancement, whose deep faith, commitment to Servite, and love for his two sons who are students here came through in every one of our conversations over the past several months as we planned this event. It is also a great honor to share the podium with Steve Berline. What a phenomenal career at Servite, Notre Dame, the NFL, CBS, and so on. Thanks to Steve's pioneer role, when you tune into an NFL game these days, you're likely to find a Servite alum on the field or in the broadcast booth. I'm very proud tonight to be joined by my family. Rob, thank you for mentioning them. My wife, Kim, is a local girl who knew Servite families growing up. Kim attended Starbuck Junior High School, which no longer exists. She also attended Lowell High School, which no longer exists. Kind of makes you wonder about the fate of her other alma mater, UCLA. It's mine too. Kim and I were raised within miles of each other, but did not meet until years later. We then shared a family life, blessed by two wonderful children in various corners of the world. To become part of the Foreign Service life, Kim left behind a career as an award-winning television news producer in Los Angeles. But I can tell you, the loss to LA News was a gain for our nation's diplomacy because Kim was every step of the way a highly effective representative of our country. She shares this award with me. Kim and I are especially happy to be here with our daughter Cameron and son Evan, multilingual products of the nomadic Foreign Service existence who helped us show America's energy and spirit to the world. They make us enormously proud at home and abroad. My older brother Peter is the pioneer of the Kelly family at Servite and in public life. Peter has had a distinguished career in politics, law, and public affairs in California and Washington, D.C. His wife Carla, a supermom who has had a successful career in television production, is also here, as are their wonderful kids, Caitlin and Dylan. Also at our table are two friends who are like family, Suzanne Stevens and Roman Manning. Now, Roman is from Wisconsin. You may have noticed he snuck out a few minutes ago to catch the overtime victory of Wisconsin over Arizona. And as Rob noted, there are two members of our family who are no longer with us, our parents, Peter and Connie Kelly, who deprived themselves of many things to send their sons to Servite. There are thousands of Servite parents who have done the same thing, and I think I can speak for all Servite students and alumni when I say we salute you all and thank every one of you. Finally, I would like to pay respects to those from Servite's class of 1972 who are no longer with us. Ralph Fiscara, Jack Huberts, Jim Snitzler, Robert Voorhees, Frank Berriman, and Michael Fuel. Tonight's dinner recognizes leadership, and that is appropriate because Servite has had the wisdom to highlight leadership in its curriculum, which blends Catholic teachings with leadership principles. Some leadership traits may be innate, but I believe that most are learned through education, mentoring, and the ups and downs of life. So Servite does well by its students and by the wider world by educating for leadership. As I noted, mentors and examples are critical for those who aspire to leadership positions. So tonight, I would like to mention a few. In fact, I've already mentioned one, my older brother Peter, who taught me more than he realizes about how to navigate in the world of public affairs and public policy. In my State Department career, I was blessed to work closely with some extraordinary U.S. diplomatic leaders, Colin Powell, Condi Rice, Hillary Clinton, legendary Ambassador Tom Pickering, just to name a few. I also got to work closely with several U.S. presidents and foreign heads of state. Through it all, I have found that there are three major traits that characterize leadership around the world: vision, courage, and a human touch. Vision first. You cannot lead if you do not know where you are going. But once you know where you're going, you need courage to get there, because nothing is easy in diplomacy or any other worthwhile endeavor. And finally, you need to remain rooted in the human struggles that are the foundation for all diplomatic crises and important problems. No one better exemplified these qualities than Pope John Paul II, one of the great leaders of the 20th century. John Paul, who had lived the horrors of Nazi and communist domination of Poland, possessed a vision of a Europe that was free, united, and at peace. He also had the courage to assert those values in the face of political oppression in his homeland and much of the rest of Central and Eastern Europe. His travels to Poland as Pope bolstered the spirit of his countrymen and all people who sought freedom. John Paul also traveled to several Cold War hotspots around the world, from Southern Africa to Central America, seeking at some personal risk to urge peaceful settlement of disputes. Now, it is no secret that the United States worked closely with the Vatican on all these issues through the U.S. Embassy to the Holy See. Kim and I had the good fortune to begin our married life together in Rome, assigned to that embassy in the final 2 years of the Cold War. Working with superbly trained Vatican diplomats at such a pivotal time in history was unforgettable. Let me give an example of the sort of insights that the U.S. Embassy gained at the Vatican. In 1988, an Irish Monsignor named Darmot Martin, who was the Deputy Chief of the Vatican's Justice and Peace Commission, traveled to what was then East Germany for about 6 weeks. Darmot was a good friend to Kim and me. He used to come to our house for St. Patrick's Day parties in Rome, and we admired him greatly. When he returned from his East Germany trip, Monsignor Martin and I went to lunch. Remember, this is 1988. During our meal, Darmot said, "Craig, you're going to think I'm crazy, but the whole thing is coming apart within a year." Now, it is often said that nobody really predicted the fall of the Berlin Wall, but this Irish priest did. And I believe that those insights, combined with the Pope's abiding faith in the yearning for freedom in Central and Eastern Europe, fueled John Paul's courageous push for change. And by the way, Monsignor Martin today is Cardinal Martin, Archbishop of Dublin. For all of John Paul's prominence on the world stage, Kim and I found that he was perhaps even more inspiring in his one-on-one encounters with people of all walks of life, rich or poor, healthy or terminally ill, of all ethnic backgrounds and faiths. His kindness touched us personally during Holy Week of 1988. Every year on Holy Thursday, the Pope gives communion to the diplomatic corps and spouses at the glorious church of St. John Lateran in Rome. In fact, I have a photo here of Kim as she received communion on Holy Thursday, 1988. But there is something the picture does not show. A few weeks earlier, Kim had broken her foot and therefore had to hobble to the altar in a cast. I was right behind her. As Kim approached the Holy Father, he realized that she was limping and stole a glance down at her cast. For a split second, his face revealed a combination of sympathy and amusement that we will never forget. And then, just like that, he returned to the solemnity of the moment, as you see in the picture. This, of course, was just a fleeting example of a life filled with genuine concern for others. I don't think you can separate John Paul, the Good Samaritan, from John Paul, the world leader. He could not have inspired the world if he had not felt compassion for individual human beings. Now, we've all met the occasional fanatical idealist who loves humanity but does not seem particularly fond of individual human beings. Great leaders are not like that. They are rooted in the day-to-day struggles of real people. And that means a sense of humor, too. John Paul delighted in the jokes that circulated about him in the Vatican. Let me share one. Remember, this is during the Cold War, and nobody but Monsignor Martin knew how that was going to end. So this story has John Paul praying to God, and he says, "Lord, will Poland ever be free and independent?" And God replies, "Not in your lifetime, John Paul." The Pope says, "That's a shame. Tell me this then, Lord. After me, will there ever be another Polish Pope?" And God replies, "Not in my lifetime, John Paul." Now, as you've seen in tonight's video, Colin Powell was another great leader with a human touch. One day in the spring of 2001, when I was working for him, we were swamped with the diplomatic aftermath of a crisis with China. A U.S. military surveillance aircraft and a Chinese fighter plane had collided near China's Hainan Island near the south coast of China, and tensions between the two countries were very high. In Secretary Powell's office, we were working even longer hours than normal, including in the middle of the night due to the time difference with China. But one particular afternoon, I really needed to get away to see our daughter Cameron, who was 8 years old at the time, in a school play. So I walked into Secretary Powell's office and said, "Sir, our daughter is in a school play that starts at 5:30 this afternoon, so I'd like to leave at 4:45. Without looking up from a memo he was reading, he said, "Leave at 4 o'clock. Don't be late to that play." Leaders have to deal repeatedly with crises, and this is where vision and courage come into play. You just heard Colin Powell describe our experiences on 9/11 in Lima, Peru. What he left out, because he is a modest man, is that before we went to the airport to return to Washington, we stopped at that meeting he mentioned of the Organization of American States, where the assembled foreign ministers had hastily prepared a beautiful statement of solidarity with the United States in our hour of peril. In reply, Powell delivered an impromptu, moving address thanking the foreign ministers for their support and citing our common democratic principles as an essential tool in fighting terrorism. All of us on Powell's staff knew that he felt devastated inside by the attacks that had just occurred in our country, but his steady and strong delivery of that speech was a true profile of courage. Because of the terrorist attacks, our travels over the next couple of years included destinations and means of transportation that people do not usually associate with the rarefied air of international diplomacy. We went into Afghanistan immediately after the U.S. troops had pushed back the Taliban. To get there, we flew to Islamabad in our normal plane, an Air Force equivalent of the Boeing 757 with the beautiful United States of America on the outside. In Islamabad, we switched to a U.S. military C-130 that would carry us over the snow-covered Hindu Kush Mountains toward Afghanistan. As we flew over those rugged peaks, everyone on board reflected grimly that it was likely that Osama bin Laden was hiding somewhere below. The moment we crossed into Afghan airspace, a pair of U.S. F-15 fighter aircraft appeared on each of our wings to escort us all the way to Bagram Air Base north of the capital. From there, we took U.S. combat helicopters to Kabul, with gunners manning 50 caliber machine guns in the helicopter windows. Likewise, we traveled several times to Baghdad right after the Iraq War. We would arrive in Kuwait, switch to the C-130, and head to Baghdad's airport. But since the road from the airport to downtown Baghdad was at that time known as the Highway of Death because of widespread terror attacks, we shuttled into town by troop transport helicopters with Apache attack helicopters surrounding us, and all of the helos swaying and swerving close to the ground to make it difficult for surface-to-air missiles to lock onto us. And once when we were in Jerusalem, we were taking off on military helicopters to visit an Israeli army base in the north of the country near the Lebanese border. As we ascended from the helicopter pad, a suicide bomber blew up a market in central Jerusalem. And shortly after we landed at the base in northern Israel, Iranian-backed Hezbollah fighters began firing rockets into northern Israel from southern Lebanon. I mention these travel stories because it was inspiring to watch Powell through it all. This is a man who had actually survived 2 helicopter crashes before becoming Secretary of State, one in Vietnam, one in Jamaica. And I cannot imagine that those near misses did not occasionally cross his mind as we crisscrossed through multiple conflict zones. But you never would have known it. He was always, as the saying goes, the calmest person in the room, or the helicopter, or wherever we were. I will never forget our repeated trips from Jerusalem to Ramallah on the West Bank to meet Yasser Arafat. The corridors outside the meeting room bristled with heavily armed U.S. and Palestinian security agents with Israeli troops nearby, and mobs of press clamoring for photos of the 2 delegations. It was a circus atmosphere, but Powell's rock-solid calm enabled serious discussions to occur. Now, not all the hazardous duty takes place overseas, of course. There's always Washington, D.C. Washington politics and policy making are not for the faint of heart, as you may have seen in House of Cards. There is a reason why Harry Truman once said, "If you want a friend in Washington, buy a dog." Powell and his successors, Condi Rice and Hillary Clinton, were masters of how to navigate in that world, achieve real results, and maintain their dignity. I recall being with Condi Rice at a White House meeting that debated a certain international trade initiative. It was controversial, and she knew exactly what everyone in the room would say before she walked in. She steered the debate so skillfully, getting what she wanted while making sure the others did not feel that they lost, that even one of our staff asked me as we left the room, "Did we win?" Well, we certainly had, but Secretary Rice was not there to crow. She was there to get something done. Indira Gandhi, the former Prime Minister of India, used to say, my grandfather once told me that there are two kinds of people, those who do the work and those who take the credit. He told me to try to be in the first group because there's much less competition there. The three secretaries of state that I had the privilege to work closely with, Powell, Rice, and Clinton, were definitely in the first group. In fact, they always seemed happiest when shifting the attention and the credit to other people. When I was ambassador in Chile, as has been noted, Kim and I launched a Chilean affiliate of Little League Baseball. Secretary Rice visited Chile in 2005 to meet with the country's president. She took time to greet one of our Little League teams at the airport and received a signed baseball from them, a nice reversal of the usual protocol. She conveyed genuinely that she was the one who was honored by the meeting. It is every diplomat's dream to be able to draw on the lessons learned during a career and apply them during critical moments. I had several such opportunities as ambassador to Chile, running an embassy of 300 people and dealing with the highly professional Chilean government on sensitive issues such as the situation in Venezuela, terrorism, UN problems, and important trade matters. We also hosted President Bush and the First Lady for 3 days in Chile shortly after we arrived. But perhaps in my career, the incident that most tested my experience was the aftermath of a coup d'etat that took place in Honduras in 2009, when I was the #2 official for the Western Hemisphere at the State Department. Various international efforts to resolve the crisis had failed, so President Obama and Secretary of State Clinton asked 2 colleagues and myself to travel to Honduras to mediate. The leader of the coup was installed in the presidential palace, and the ousted president, who originally had been taken out of the country, had been smuggled back in and was living in the Brazilian embassy in Tegucigalpa, the capital of Honduras. Working with both sides and officials from the Organization of American States, our 3-person team managed to broker an agreement that would allow the country to hold presidential elections under international observation. In order to facilitate the implementation of the agreement, I returned to Tegucigalpa several times over the next 4 months and shuttled back and forth between the de facto president and the ousted president to encourage support for the elections and afterward a smooth change in power. Throughout all of this, President Obama and Secretary Clinton gave us plenty of political top cover, very important in Washington, because the issue is very controversial in the U.S. media and the Congress. That is another mark of leadership. It was gratifying for us that the majority of Hondurans backed our mission and that the United States role was welcomed in the local press. In one Honduran political cartoon, we were even portrayed as waiters serving the cause of a peaceful transition. That cartoon conveyed an important truth about leadership. It is really about serving, helping to create the conditions that let people solve their own problems and seize their own opportunities. That is clearly what Servite's leadership training is about. And it is especially appropriate that our school's very name reflects the concept of service. What I've tried to convey through a few of these stories, and I had the honor to tell several more yesterday at lunch with the students, is that good leadership is based on character and values. Character and values are shaped by faith, strong families, and by sound education. The role that Servite plays in fostering the faith, bringing together families into a community, and giving kids a strong education with a focus on leadership is admirable. This is exactly what our country and the world need more of. Now, everyone knows that leadership is best exercised by example. I certainly learned that at Servite. Our senior year, our class got the usual case of spring semester senioritis. It happened to manifest itself in an outbreak of food fights at lunchtime. Very bad stuff, and the school administration was determined to put an end to it. As student body president, I was expected to set the example, and so I did, as the yearbook staff captured so trenchant. Seriously though, Servite taught us all that as we moved on in life, we would be shouldering increasing responsibilities, and that our faith, our families, and our education provided the foundation to set positive examples for others, and to understand that to assume the burdens of leadership is a privilege. Now, I have focused tonight on some famous world leaders, but let me close with a story about a great leader no one has ever heard of. His name is Father Gabriel. He's a Servite priest who runs a home for abused and neglected children on the outskirts of Santiago, Chile. Father Gabriel and his team are determined to help the young people in their charge get a fresh start in life after what, in many cases, is unspeakable trauma. Father Gabriel is also a genuine holy man who several times a year goes off by himself in the high Andes Mountains to pray. Over the Christmas holiday of 2005, when our family was living in Chile, we had the pleasure of hosting the Storch family. We also had visits from many Servite families, the Greiners, the Jurgers, and others, and it was always a great pleasure to have them come to our doorstep when we were at various points around the compass. This particular Christmas, it was John Storch and his family. Now, John Storch was the vice president of the class of 1972, and I'm pretty sure he was one of the lucky ones cropped out of the picture that I just showed. Together, the Storches and the Kellys enjoyed a Southern Hemisphere summer Christmas, including an outdoor Christmas Eve Mass. On Christmas Day, we all piled into a van to pay a visit to Father Gabriel and his family and children. It was sobering to contrast the Christmas celebration we are accustomed to with that of these poor children. But what left an even greater impression was the determination and joy that illuminated Father Gabriel, without whom God only knows what would have happened to these kids. Father Gabriel offered them a path. He offered them hope. Father Gabriel is proof that leadership comes in many forms. So in closing, let me say thank you to Servite for the great education, for helping to prepare me back in the early 70s for the long road ahead. An extended Servite family that can produce leaders as diverse and impressive as Father Gabriel, Steve Berline, and Jack Davis must be doing something right. May Servite continue to succeed in that sacred mission. That you should honor me tonight is humbling, and I will never forget it. Thank you, and God bless you.